in Miami, Florida, Tuesday for his arraignment. He has long denied any wrongdoing in the case. The charges stem from the discovery of more than 300 sensitive materials found at his Florida estate during an FBI search last August. And joining me now is white-collar criminal defense attorney Venu Varghese. Venu, lay out for us, well, how serious is this? We know it's retention of national security defense documents and obstruction. How serious is that?
I think this is the most serious charges that he could be potentially facing. And if I were his team, this would be the one that concerns me more than what's going on in Manhattan. The Manhattan case in state court there has numerous problems, legal issues. The fact that they indicted him here means that they believe that they have enough evidence to go forward. The DOJ generally, doesn't move forward unless they believe they have enough. The problem for them is that this is going to be viewed as a political prosecution and in the circles that Donald Trump runs in, a persecution or continued persecution. And for them, from a factual point of view, and obviously we're just hearing this, we don't have the indictment, and we are a long way away from knowing what the actual evidence is. What's been out there so far seems to me to be questionable. And what I mean by that is you have something that really cuts in the way of politics, a political question over whether he should have kept it or not. And now now you've actually charged a former president, a person who's actually running for president again. And it's hard to stay back and look at this, or sit back and look at this and say, is this devoid of politics? That's going to be a tough question for Merrick Garland.
But there's definitely been a former Army, I believe it was a former Army lieutenant colonel was just sentenced to 3 years, I believe it was, for retention of documents. So if the signature proposition of American law is that no one is above the law, if it happens to a lieutenant colonel, presumably it should also be able to happen, if the facts are proved and so forth, it should be able to happen to a former president.
Look, what you're saying is correct from a purely theoretical point of view, but the charging decisions are never just theoretical. They are practical. And in this case, in this environment, does it make sense for the Department of Justice to charge the former president, the most recent former president, and the person who's running for president again? And on top of this, you have a situation that seemed to be mishandled from the beginning by Merrick Garland. They could have made this a public thing and say, look, Mr. Trump, I'm giving you, or President Trump, and give him his proper accolades as a former president, and say, we're going to give you till this date to return the documents. And then there was the execution of a search warrant. Well, they should have been clear that if you don't do it by this date, we're going to execute a search warrant on your home. They didn't say that.
But I mean,
they didn't say that the FBI is going to go in if you don't do it by this date.
But
that's a problem.
My recollection of the facts of the case is that Mr. Trump or his attorney made representations that he in fact had given everything back, and presumably those representations are going to be part of the obstruction case. And I want to ask you about a conspiracy to obstruct, which is to say not just one person and whether you think it might include multiples. But if you make representations that you don't have anything and then you keep something, that's not good. And that's not, I mean, whether you're a former president or not, you can't misrepresent. And in this case, what seems to be the highest level of classification documents, you can't misrepresent that to federal officials.
Well, again, what's been said and what was actually conveyed to his attorney and what his attorney was authorized to say, these are all things that are going to come out. And the other problem that they have is you've learned since then, President Biden had documents in his Delaware home. You've heard that former Vice President Pence had documents in his home. So when you look at all these different things, and you got to say to yourself, is this the wisest course of action for the Department of Justice? And are they going to be able to have a jury that's going to look at the facts and not, whatever side you're on, ultimately, can you prove your case? And part of proving your case is not only whether you have charges that are sufficient to go forward, but whether you can secure a conviction. And I think that will be difficult pretty much everywhere, but in certain places in this country. But I think where they're going to presumably bring this case, or what we understand so far, is if it's in Miami. I mean, that's going to be an interesting locale, and I think they have their job cut out for them to bring the case in Miami.
Speaking of Miami, what do you think we can expect to happen when the former president appears in court on Tuesday?
So, I mean, this is really, really is extraordinary. I mean, he'll have to go in, and he'll be able to go in on his own. He'll get processed, and then it becomes a question whether the United States Marshals, which is the organization that will bring prisoners up into the courtroom, whether they'll give him the courtesy of going up there without being handcuffed. The thing that's different in federal court than in most state courts is that no cameras are allowed in a federal court. That hasn't been approved in any federal court in this country. So you're not going to see cameras, but you'll see sketches. There'll be sketch artists, and he's got to be processed. And so there is an organization called Pretrial Services, which will have to come up with a report and discuss his finances. So, for all those people who are looking at his finances, the different organizations such as whether it's Congress or the District Attorney's Office in Manhattan, he's got to reveal basically everything to pretrial service. That will be one of the conditions. And then he'll be released. I can't imagine there would be any sort of bond. Obviously, we know he's not a flight risk and he's not a danger to the community. These are the two standards to determine whether any bail or bond is going to be set in the federal system, and he doesn't meet either standard. So he's going to be released on his own, but he'll have to report to pretrial, which is fascinating for a former president who has obviously got a Secret Service detail.
Right. Anu Varghese, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
CBS News justice and law enforcement producer Robert Ligari joins me now. Robert, how strong does special counsel Jack Smith's case need to? Well, let me ask you this. What are you looking for? We know something about these indictments. What else are you looking for in what we might learn coming out that's a part of these indictments?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. So first, what we know is our colleagues here at CBS News, Graham Case, Pat Milton, and Jeff Begaze have confirmed that this is a 7-count indictment. What we're hearing from our sources is this is related to the willful retention of national defense information and obstruction. So what we're looking for now is specifics. We've been staking out the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. for the last 6 to 8 months. And what we've learned is that numerous witnesses have been called to this grand jury, discussing their interactions with the former president, discussing their employment at Mar-a-Lago. They've gone from maids and employees at Mar-a-Lago all the way up to his defense attorney, Evan Corcoran, who was forced to testify despite claims of attorney-client privilege. So what we'll be looking for now is what direct conduct they have tied to the former president and whether or not these charges connect to other people related to the investigation as well.
And Rob, just to grab hold of something you said, the interviews have been so thorough, including with his valet and others, because one of the lines of investigation is whether people were asked, ordered, or otherwise by the former president to move these documents subsequent to being asked if he had them, which would presumably be a part of an obstruction case.
Yeah, that's right. So what we've learned here at CBS News over the course of this investigation is that prosecutors are honing in and have honed in clearly now that the indictment has been handed down as to whether or not their investigation and their attempt to claw back these documents with classified markings were impeded in any way. And so they've been talking to, as you mentioned, his valet, Walt Nauta, and others, curious about whether actions were taken to either move boxes full of classified documents or whether any orders were given in order to do so. And so that specifically as well is we're going to look for in the indictment. And I think it's also important to remember that our colleague Robert Costa, Catherine Herridge, and others have reported that Trump's attorney's notes that were also handed over to the grand jury are also important in this. They show conversations between Trump and his attorney, Evan Corcoran, and that could be illuminating to the prosecutors as well. It's important to recognize that in this case, attorney-client privilege for certain information was waived by a federal judge here in Washington, D.C. to allow that to happen.
And on that, Evan Corcoran, it also includes, as I recall, and check me if I'm wrong here, Rob, he at one point dictated into his phone, or so it contains contemporaneous audio of the former president's lawyer talking about conversations he had had with the former president.
That's right. Voice memos are also there as well, and so we're going to be looking for that. One other thing to mention, just as we're talking about this, in terms of recordings, according to our reporting here at CBS News, prosecutors are also in possession of another recording of the former president from July 2021 in Bedminster, his golf club in New Jersey, in which, according to our reporting, he's discussing a document that is allegedly classified related to Iran. And so that as well leads prosecutors to think that maybe there was knowledge or recognition that that document could have been classified. And
on that specific point, under the Espionage Act, there's a kind of two-part test, at least as it was a part of the subpoena from last August to get these documents, was it's not just retention, it's also dissemination. And so in terms of that conversation you were just referring to, which also includes the possibility that the former president knew exactly that what he had, he shouldn't have had, was also this idea of dissemination. That he's not just holding on to it, but he's doing something with these sensitive materials.
That's right. So when we first got when the search warrant was executed at Mar-a-Lago in August, court proceedings unsealed court documents that showed certain evidence that the prosecutors thought they might uncover in that search warrant. Now, I don't want to get ahead of the indictment. I don't know what it says. We'll have to find out. What we do know, however, is that prosecutors were concerned that he retained that information. What we have now learned from our reporting here is that national defense information is connected to these charges.
Rob, thank you so much for breaking this all down for us. We really appreciate it. Sean Sullivan, Deputy Politics Editor for Campaigns at The Washington Post, joins me now on the phone. Sean, your reaction to this indictment?
Well, it's, really, really early in the process right now. And like a lot of journalists and people in the public, we're trying to assess, what the specific nature of this indictment is going to entail. But, when you pull back for a second, I mean, it's a moment that we have not seen before. We have not seen a president face federal charges. And, now we are in sort of uncharted territory, both legally, politically, and, we're in the midst of a campaign right now for the Republican nomination where this former president is now the front runner, at least at the moment, for the Republican nomination. Almost every public poll in both early states and nationally shows him to be the favorite. And that's the other question here is what is the political impact of this going to be? When you look back earlier this year at what happened when, he was charged in the New York case, there was a rallying effect to him. You saw Republicans rally to his side. You saw him raise a lot of money. And you saw a lot of his opponents, steer clear from attacking him over it. Now, the nature of this situation and this indictment is very different from what we saw in New York. The question is whether that will create a different reaction from the public and also from his rivals who are eager to defeat him in this race right now.
Well, and I want to walk down that path you've just outlined for us here, Sean. Let me ask you about fundraising. In the New York case, I think the president was still inside being arraigned when his team put out a fundraising call with a fake mugshot. Has anything like that happened from the Trump camp with respect to this indictment?
Well, I haven't seen anything specific like that yet, but that has been certainly a strategy, as you point out, John, that this campaign has used, that they view these moments as moments where they think that his base will rally to him, where they think that his base will, see him as a target of an unjust investigation. And in fact, we've seen already, in the last few hours here, a video posted on social media by former President Trump saying that, look, I'm innocent and that the government, the Justice Department is being weaponized against me. He is saying, look, this is election interference. He's saying this without evidence. He's saying this without any specific justifications to back up his claim. But he is effectively accusing the government now of trying to interfere in the next election. And remember, this is a president who has falsely and basically repeatedly claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from him. And so he's he's starting to do something very similar right now. We've seen this line of argument from him at some of his recent rallies and public speeches.
And that good point you just made about the 2020 election, CBS News polling shows that the majority of primary voters in his party believe him about the 2020 election. Anything from the other campaigns that that we're hearing, or what's your sense of the reaction there, Sean?
Well, it's been quiet so far, but it's very early going. And as I said, I think, you know, if you look at the sort of direction of this race over the last week, you've seen former Vice President Mike Pence enter the race with a speech that was very, very critical of Donald Trump, singled him out over January 6th, singled him out over the false claims he's made about a stolen election. You saw Chris Christie launch a campaign this week who said that he is going to be very, very open about drawing a distinction and criticizing the former president. And Ron DeSantis, who is running second right now in a lot of these polls, has shown he's not shying away from attacking Trump. There was a period there of 4 or 5 months where it wasn't clear how exactly DeSantis was going to navigate this. So it is sort of a decision point for these candidates. Do they want to go out there and use this to sort of further their argument against him? Or do they join his cause and join his calls and say, you know, this is a politically motivated attack against him? It's too early right now to really assess.
Type 2
but, you know, I think the reactions we see in the next few hours and tomorrow will be really telling about kind of how Republicans see this politically playing out in the 2024 race.
Sean Sullivan, Washington Post. Thank you, Sean.
Ozempic provides powerful A1C reduction.
We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. You're streaming CBS News Primetime.
And maintained it. Ozempic lowers the risk of major cardiovascular events, such as stroke, heart attack, or death, in adults also with known heart disease. And you may lose weight. Adults lost up to 14 pounds.
COVID-19.
Ozempic
I'm not waiting.
Isn't for people with type
If
1
it's
diabetes.
COVID, Paxlovid.
Authorized for emergency use, Paxlovid is an oral treatment for people 12 and up who have mild to moderate COVID-19 and have a high risk factor for it becoming severe.
My symptoms are mild now, but I'm not risking it. If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
If you have a risk factor, like being 50 plus, being overweight, asthma or others, don't wait. If you get COVID, there's something you can do. Taken within 5 days of symptoms, Paxlovid reduced the risk of developing severe COVID by 86%.
Paxlovid may strengthen or weaken other medicines. Taking it with certain medicines may cause life-threatening side effects or affect how Paxlovid works. So it's critical to tell your doctor about all medicines you take, including herbal supplements, because lab tests or changing the dose of your medicines may be needed. Tell your doctor if you have any serious illnesses, allergies, liver or kidney disease, are pregnant or plan to become pregnant, are breastfeeding or use birth control. Paxlovid may affect how your birth control works. Don't take Paxlovid if you're allergic to nirmatrelvir, ritonavir, or any of its ingredients. Serious side effects can include allergic reactions, liver problems, and issues with HIV medicines. Other side effects include altered taste, diarrhea, high blood pressure, muscle aches, abdominal pain, nausea, and feeling unwell.
If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
Ask your doctor or pharmacist if Paxlovid, an innovation from Pfizer, is right for you.
Seize the day with Zyrtec. COVID-19. I'm not waiting. If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
Authorized for emergency use, Paxlovid is an oral treatment for people 12 and up who have mild to moderate COVID-19 and have a high risk factor for it becoming severe.
My symptoms are mild now, but I'm not risking it. If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
If you have a risk factor, like being 50 plus, being overweight, asthma or others, don't wait. If you get COVID, there's something you can do. Taken within 5 days of symptoms, Paxlovid reduced the risk of developing severe COVID by 86%.
Paxlovid may strengthen or weaken other medicines. Taking it with certain medicines may cause life-threatening side effects or affect how Paxlovid works. So it's critical to tell your doctor about all medicines you take, including herbal supplements, because lab tests or changing the dose of your medicines may be needed. Tell your doctor if you have any serious illnesses, allergies, liver or kidney disease, are pregnant or plan to become pregnant, are breastfeeding or use birth control. Paxlovid may affect how your birth control works. Don't take Paxlovid if you're allergic to nirmatrelvir, ritonavir, or any of its ingredients. Serious side effects can include allergic reactions, liver problems, and issues with HIV medicines. Other side effects include altered taste, diarrhea, high blood pressure, muscle aches, abdominal pain, nausea, and feeling unwell.
If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
Ask your doctor or pharmacist if Paxlovid, an innovation from Pfizer, is right for you.
Be uplifting.
Welcome back to CBS News Primetime. We want to return to our top story. The 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, has been indicted over his handling of classified documents. He is now the first former president in the United States, and in United States history to face federal charges. Trump responded with a video on his social media platform, Truth Social.
Get ready.
I'm an innocent man. We will prove that again. 7 years of proving it, and here we go again. Very unfair.
Who has what it takes to become America's best?
And now let's bring in Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason. Jeff, let's review the bidding. Remind us how these documents even ended up at the former president's home and how we got here.
Well, that's a good way to start, John. And these documents came after President Trump served 4 years in office and was asked by the Department of Justice to turn over any documents that had ended up at Mar-a-Lago, his home in Florida, and then was accused of not doing so. And more documents were found, and that has spiraled into what we're seeing today. It's interesting to me to see not only President Trump's reaction, but also to think about the political consequences for him as he runs for re-election, for the opponents who are running against him for the Republican nomination, and for President Joe Biden, who will no doubt tomorrow probably try to be silent about this. And I can just imagine all of my colleagues who are traveling with him to North Carolina tomorrow will try to ask him about it. But this is not only a legal story, it is a political story, and it is a social story.
And having covered President Trump, as you did, I remember you asking an important question about whether the president would abide by the Electoral College vote, which is a part of the other part of Jack Smith's investigation. But does the response from the former president to this track with your experience having covered him?
Absolutely. And yeah, I did ask him about that, and that did not go over well. And that's just been an example of the many mistruths and denials that he has made about his own conduct and his policies and his positions for 7 years. I mean, you asked if it tracks. I mean, him saying that this has been 7 years of him having to prove himself an innocent man underscores the fact that it's been 7 years of controversy and, in some cases, legal peril. And that legal peril has come to a head here. But you're also right to mention Georgia. I mean, I think another headline tonight could be more to come. We don't know what else is going to come out of the other investigations, but this is just one. And it's all coming as he's running for re-election, and it's a critical and historic moment.
Indeed. Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason, thanks for being with us, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is on his phone there, reporting, as always. It's very nice to see you, Ed, after being on the phone with you. What are the other candidates saying?
Well, we've had a few statements come in, John, from those in the field. Perhaps the most predictable is that from former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who just a little while and has been a chief critic of the former president, urging him to get out of the race. He reiterates that tonight, saying that Donald Trump's actions, from his willful disregard for the Constitution to his disrespect for the rule of law, should not define our nation or the Republican Party. This is a sad day for our country. While Donald Trump is entitled to the presumption of innocence, the ongoing criminal proceedings will be a major distraction. This reaffirms the need for Donald Trump to respect the office and his campaign. Other Republican contenders, however, lesser known than the former president and some of his top rivals, also weighing in. Vivek Ramaswamy, the 37-year-old business executive who's been catching wind in the early primary states, weighing in a little while ago, saying in part, quote, "We cannot have two tiers of justice, one for Trump on government document retention, another for Biden, one for Assange, another for Manning, one for BLM Antifa, another for peaceful protesters on January 6th. I never thought we would see the day when the U.S. president deputizes the DOJ to arrest his lead rival in the middle of an election." These are quite inflammatory comments by these Republican contenders, but it speaks to the concern, to the opposition, to the anger that a lot of Republican voters have across the country. Remember, the president was asked about this earlier today in a news conference with the British Prime Minister. What would he say to those who are concerned that the Justice Department is being used for political means? The president somewhat angrily responded, pointing out that he had never once, quote, "not one single time suggested to the Justice Department what they should do or not do relative to bringing a charge or not bringing a charge, I'm honest. That was his way of saying, in essence, the former president meddled in Justice Department affairs all the time. The current president, he argued, does not. And in fact, we have asked the White House again tonight, when did the president learn about this? When did the White House learn about this? And several aides tell us that they were informed through media reports, as were most Americans. John.
Senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for watching. I'm John Dickerson in New York. You're streaming CBS News Primetime.